A German shepherd stops an ambulance in the middle of a raging storm, and what they discover next breaks everyone who sees it. The crew's racing through the rain with a dying man in the back when the dog jumps into their path, refusing to move. Sirens wail, tires screech, and then something in the dark catches their eyes. Beneath the floodwater lies another car, twisted metal, shattered glass, and inside, a woman and a baby fighting for their lives. But as they pull them out, one detail doesn't fit. The man they were rushing to save might not be a victim at all. The deeper they go, the more everything they thought they knew turns upside down, until every life on that road, even the dog's, is part of a secret someone would kill to keep buried. Why did the dog risk everything to stop that ambulance? And what terrible truth was waiting in the rain? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Rain hammered the mountains like fists against iron. The wipers on the ambulance flailed back and forth, but the storm swallowed everything beyond the yellow lines. Ayla Rowan leaned forward in her seat, squinting through the windshield. Her knuckles were white on the dashboard. "Visibility's shot," she said over the roar of the siren. "We should slow down." Theo Pierce kept one hand steady on the wheel. "Sheriff said priority transport. We're 5 minutes out." "Yeah," Ayla muttered, "and if we skid off this ridge, we'll be a new priority." The patient behind them, a man in his early 30s, lay strapped to the stretcher, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. Blood oozed slowly through the gauze at his temple. The ID on his jacket pocket read, Keaton Voss. The name didn't ring a bell, but the sheriff's urgency earlier had. "Get him there fast," Hart had barked at them. "Summit General's expecting him. Don't stop for anything." Ayla had worked enough shifts to know that kind of order always meant something was off. Still, she'd nodded and climbed in. Rules, protocols, structure. That's what kept her from thinking about the rescue she hadn't finished 3 years ago. The one that ended with a child she couldn't save. Lightning cracked across the sky. The light lit the road in violent flashes, revealing a shape up ahead, something dark and still. "Animal," Theo said, gripping the wheel tighter. But as they got closer, the shape moved. Ayla's breath caught. "Theo, stop!" The ambulance screamed as Theo slammed the brakes. The rig fishtailed across the wet asphalt, tires spitting water, until it jolted to a halt a few yards from the figure standing square in their path. A German shepherd, soaked to the bone, chest heaving, eyes blazing gold in the headlights. The dog didn't flinch, didn't back away. He barked once, sharp and deliberate, as if he were giving an order. "What the—" Theo leaned on the horn. "Get out of the road." But the dog didn't move. Instead, he turned his head toward the right side of the road, toward the black void where the mountain dropped into darkness, and barked again. Ayla felt it then, a low vibration that wasn't thunder, a sound beneath the rain. She unbuckled. "Kill the siren." Theo hesitated. "Ayla, the sheriff said—" "Kill it!" The wail died. For a second, there was only the storm, and then she heard it clearly. A horn. Weak. Faint. Coming from below. Her gut tightened. "There's someone down there." Theo frowned. "We don't have time for—" "We have to check," he cursed, but he grabbed his flashlight and followed as she threw open the door. The cold hit them like a slap. Wind tore at their jackets, and rain streamed down their faces in sheets. Ayla clipped her rescue line to the guardrail and started down the embankment. The dog, tagged Rook, followed, bounding ahead, barking into the storm. The flashlight beam cut through the blackness, slicing across twisted metal. A sedan lay wedged against a tree, half submerged in the rising river. The hazard lights blinked weakly, half drowned in mud. "Oh my God," Ayla whispered. There's a car! They slid and scrambled down the slick slope. The current roared louder now, swollen from the storm. Isla peered through the shattered window, saw a woman slumped over the steering wheel, hair plastered to her face. A faint movement flickered in the back seat. An infant carrier, upside down. She didn't think. Training took over. "Theo!" she shouted. "We've got at least 2 victims." Theo swore, tossed her the crowbar from his belt kit. Ayla drove it into the window with a single swing. The glass gave way with a wet crash. Water rushed in, brown and cold as stone. She fought her way in, cut the woman's seatbelt, and hauled her limp body toward the surface. Rook barked madly from the bank. Theo caught Ayla's arm and dragged both women onto the gravel. "She's breathing," he said, checking the woman's pulse. "Weak but steady." "The baby," Ayla gasped. "There's a baby." She dove again before he could stop her. The current shoved her sideways, dragging at her boots. She got her fingers under the car seat strap and tore it free. When she surfaced, her lungs burned and the baby wasn't moving. Theo's face went pale. "No pulse?" Ayla didn't answer. She dropped to her knees and started compressions. 1, 2, 3. Her hands pressed tiny ribs through soaked blankets. The rain poured harder, beating rhythm into her movements. Come on, breathe." Theo shielded them with his body from the runoff streaming down the slope. The dog crouched beside them, whining. Ayla pressed harder. "Don't you dare!" The baby coughed. The sound was thin, gasping, but it was life. Ayla almost sobbed. Theo grabbed a blanket from the trauma kit and wrapped the child, tucking him against the woman's chest. "Radio for another unit," Ayla said breathlessly. "We'll need pediatric support and extraction." Theo nodded, fumbling for his mic. Static swallowed the first few words, then cleared enough for dispatch to respond. By the time Sheriff Hart arrived, lights flashing blue against the black rain, the second ambulance was already en route. He jumped out, coat snapping in the wind. "What in hell are you doing en route?" "Rescue in progress," Ayla said firmly. "Female and infant found below the road." "I told you not to stop." Hart's face twisted. "That man in your rig is priority. You were to bring him straight in." Theo squared his shoulders. "That dog saved their lives, Sheriff. We weren't ignoring a call. We were answering one." Hart stepped closer, voice low and furious. "You don't understand who's in that stretcher, Pierce. Orders are orders." Ayla turned her face toward the ambulance, where Keaton Voss lay unconscious under steady oxygen flow. Her instincts flared. Something about this didn't smell like standard procedure. She met the sheriff's glare, unflinching. "If stopping here means breaking the wrong order," she said, "then I'll take the heat." Lightning cracked again. The rain fell harder, the current below roaring like applause or warning. It was hard to tell which. Hart's eyes flicked to the dog, then to the wreck below. "Fine, do what you want, but don't come crying when this costs you your job." He stormed back toward his cruiser, slamming the door hard enough to echo through the canyon. Theo exhaled slowly. "Hell of a night." Ayla looked down at Rook, the German shepherd sitting solid in the rain, eyes fixed on her. "He knew," she murmured. "He knew they were down there. Guess he did." She ran a trembling hand through Rook's soaked fur. Beneath the storm's fury, she felt a pulse of certainty. Quiet, but strong. This night wasn't over. Something about that patient in the back and the sheriff's orders, it didn't add up. The dog's ears flicked toward the ambulance, then back to her, as if he was warning her there was more to find. And in the storm's roaring dark, Ayla felt the first thread of dread twist in her gut. The storm clawed at the ridge. Rain came down in hard, slanting ropes that turned the dirt to slick clay. Ayla knelt in the wash of a roadside gutter with the infant tucked inside Theo's jacket, the baby's tiny chest rising in fragile stutters against a nest of gauze and foil. Her hands shook, then steadied. She pressed 2 fingers to the child's neck. A thready beat tapped back. "Still with us?" she said, voice raw. Theo swiped water from his lashes. "Second unit's 5 out. Closest pediatric." "Good." She leaned to the woman on the gravel, mid-30s, skin cold as river stone. Ayla brushed wet hair from the woman's face and checked. Pupils. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" A flicker. No words. "You're safe. You're out of the car. Stay with me." Theo cradled the infant closer, keeping the tiny mouth open for air. He glanced at the wreck below. The sedan shuddered as the river pushed and worried at it like a dog with a bone. "We were seconds from losing them," he said. Rook stood near Ayla's knee, trembling but solid, eyes flicking between her, the baby, and the guardrail, as if counting survivors. Cruiser lights strobed the hillside again. Sheriff Hart stepped into the rain, jaw set. His hat brim shed water in a steady curtain. "I gave you a direct order," he said, voice tight. "We heard a horn," Ayla answered. "There was no choice. There's always a choice. You chose wrong." He flicked a glance toward the ambulance. "Get that man to Summit now." Theo set his stance. "We're waiting on the second rig for mother and infant." Hart moved closer until she could smell wet leather and aftershave. "No. You move now. The other unit can handle the river people." Ayla's head snapped up. The river people are a mother and a baby who almost drowned. Hart's expression didn't change. The rain rolled off him like he'd trained not to feel it. "The priority patient is in your care." He held out a palm. "Body cam." Theo's shoulders lifted in a rueful laugh. "We're busy keeping a newborn breathing, Sheriff." "Now," Hart said. For a heartbeat, Ayla nearly refused on pure instinct. Instead, she slid her gaze to Theo. A small nod passed between them. Theo unclipped the camera, its indicator still blinking red, and handed it over. Hart stowed it inside his jacket without looking down. "Phone," he said, turning to Ayla. "It's in the rig. Not a lie. Not the whole truth." She kept her tone flat. "Our hands are full." Hart's eyes narrowed. 5 minutes. Wheels up." He jerked his chin towards the highway, as if the storm itself obeyed him, then angled back to his cruiser to snarl into his radio. When he was far enough, Theo muttered, "He doesn't want a record of anything we did down here." Ayla didn't answer. She was counting respirations. She was noting the woman's shiver return, a good sign, and the color warming under the skin. She was noticing the curve of dents on the sedan's front bumper, the height of the strike. She was noticing the clean cuffs on the man in the back of their rig, and the way Hart said priority like it meant untouchable. A low groan shivered from the woman's throat. "Hey," Ayla said gently. She leaned close. "You're okay. Do you know your name?" The woman's lips worked. She swallowed. Rainwater beaded on her eyelashes. "Juniper." "Juniper," Ayla repeated, to anchor her here. "This is your baby. We've got him. He's breathing." Juniper's gaze tracked to the bundle inside Theo's coat, and something fierce and ancient lit her eyes. Her hand slid up, shaking. Theo guided the tiny bundle against her chest, careful of the foil blanket, careful of the airway. The baby made a small sound, a new, stubborn little cry that pierced the storm. Juniper exhaled in a broken rush. A tear slipped to her temple and became rain. "Can you tell me what happened?" Ayla asked. Juniper blinked, as if dragging the words up from deep water. "Truck," she whispered. "Big. Right on me. Lights in the mirror. Wouldn't back off." Her gaze wavered. He hit us. Theo and Ayla locked eyes, a single word on both tongues. Keaton? Ayla asked, careful. Juniper's mouth trembled. Keaton! Behind them, Hart's voice barked through the rain. Enough field interviews. Load up. Ayla looked down at Rook. The dog sat like a sentinel at Juniper's feet, his tag a dull shine. Rook. His collar held a small, empty plastic mount, clean, rectangular, with a missing tooth where a clip might have been. Where's your camera, boy? She murmured. Rook's ears twitched toward the ambulance bay of their memory, toward some lost object that mattered. He whined once, low. The second unit crested the bend, lights cutting through the rain. Relief moved like warmth through Ayla's shoulders. 2 paramedics hopped out, a woman with gritted focus and a man already unfolding a pediatric board. 2 patients, Ayla called. Female adult with hypothermia and possible blunt trauma. Infant resuscitated, spontaneous respirations present, still unstable. We initiated warming and airway support. Copy, the woman said, dropping into a crouch beside Juniper. We've got you, Mama. Theo passed the baby, wrapped tight in layers into waiting arms. They worked fast, hands sure and calm. Juniper's fingers clung to the tiny blanket until the medic promised, We're staying together. I won't let him out of your sight. Ayla helped secure straps and watched the steady movements. Her mind kept circling the same point. Clean cuffs, bumper height crumple, Hart's eyes, the empty plastic mount on Rook's collar. Theo, she said under the rain, barely moving her lips. He had a camera. Theo's gaze flicked to the collar, then up the slope to where the ambulance idled, engine rumbling. And now he doesn't. Hart strode back, impatience sharp. Happy? They're handled. Move your rig. Ayla stood. We'll follow them in. No, Hart said, jaw grinding. Summit General, direct. Do not stop at County. Do not deviate. Ayla studied him. The rain flattened his hair, softened his edges, but nothing softened the steel behind his eyes. She felt her heartbeat change, a steadying drum she knew from rough calls and hard choices. She thought about a boy in a river 3 years ago, and how long silence could rot a person from the inside. She looked at Theo. He gave a tiny shrug that wasn't defeat. It was trust. All right, she said to Hart. We're rolling. They loaded, boots slipping on wet metal. Rook leaped in uninvited and planted himself beside Juniper's gurney as the second crew closed up. He didn't care which rig moved. He only cared that she and the baby stayed alive. The second ambulance pulled away, taillights smeared to long red lines by the water. Ayla climbed into the back of her own rig. Keaton Voss lay silent, breath shallow, monitors ticking. She smoothed the oxygen mask, checking for fog. It bloomed faintly. His wrists showed no road rash. His shirt under the blanket smelled like whiskey and expensive cologne fighting in the same room. Theo shut the doors and banged twice. Hart was already in his cruiser, pointing like a traffic cop at the dark ribbon of highway that led to Summit General. Theo slid behind the wheel and put the rig in gear. We doing this his way? He asked. No sarcasm, just a question that weighed the night. We're getting everyone alive to a hospital, Ayla said, and we're paying attention. The ambulance moved, tires hissing over flooded asphalt. The siren rose again, long and mournful. Ayla steadied herself in the rear, eyes on Keaton's vitals, brain turning over a dozen facts that didn't sit right. She ran through the protocol steps. She checked for signs of hidden trauma. She wrote times on her glove in a black marker that bled in the damp. Found vehicle 2254, Infant Rosk 2301, second unit arrival 2307. She boxed the numbers so they couldn't smudge in her head. Theo took a curve slow, wipers fighting the downpour. The radio hissed with fragments. Other accidents, flooded basements, a barn fire 2 counties over. It sounded like the world was cracking open a little at a time. Up front, the dashboard phone buzzed with a new text. Theo didn't touch it. Oila leaned forward to see the glow. A single line flashed, then vanished as a second notification buried it. Summit ready. Use Bay 3. She sat back. We'll need pediatric observation for Juniper's baby. They'll try to split them. Not if we're loud, Theo said. Ayla almost smiled. There he was, the man who had been quiet for too long and was remembering how to speak. They crested the ridge, lights from town smeared in the rain, a dim glow on the horizon like a promise or a warning. The tires hit a patch of standing water and the rig fishtailed, then grabbed. Theo corrected without swearing. Professional? Steady. In the rear, Keaton stirred. His eyes fluttered, unfocused. He mumbled, thick and cracked. Ayla leaned closer. Don't try to talk. One word seeped through the oxygen mask, a name dragged out of a dream. She couldn't be sure. It sounded like Judge. A shiver walked up her spine. She checked the straps. Secure. She checked the mask. Sealed. She checked the man's hands. No grease, no river grit. Nails clean. A gold ring dented into skin. The faintest imprint like a signature he wore, but didn't respect. Theo's voice, carried from the cab. 2 minutes out! Ayla nodded, though he couldn't see. She put her palm on the wall near the window and felt the hum of the engine. Beneath it, the storm kept on screaming. Rook's empty mount tugged at her thoughts. She pictured it clipped with a small black camera, pointed straight at a tailgating truck. She pictured the stop at the roadside turnout where Hart took the body cam without blinking. She pictured the storm drains at the ambulance bay, swallowing anything small and unguarded. She felt the old shame stir, the mission she'd failed, the voice that said you followed rules while a child slipped away. She pressed that voice down. Not tonight. Not this time. The hospital's blue sign flashed by. Summit General, emergency. Theo swung toward Bay 3. Figures in gowns and rain parkas moved behind the glass doors, quick and efficient. They were ready. Almost too ready. Ayla shifted her weight as the rig slowed. She glanced once at Keaton Voss and once at the empty mount on Rook's collar in her mind. The math of the night added up to a number she didn't like. The doors clanged open to bright light and dry air. A woman in a neat blazer stood just beyond the threshold with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Straight to imaging, she called. Bay 3 is clear. Ayla didn't step down yet. She looked at Theo. He looked back. Something in both of them settled. They would roll through those doors. They would do the work. They would keep the mother and child together. They would watch hands that tried to shuffle papers and bury timelines. They would find what the storm had washed loose. And when the next order came, they would decide if following it kept people alive or kept a lie in power. Ayla tightened the straps, checked the time, and spoke low so only Theo heard. Eyes open, she said, every second. He nodded. They pushed into the light. The hospital doors hissed open, letting in a slap of cold air and the antiseptic brightness of Summit General. Theo pushed the stretcher through first, his boots squeaking on the slick floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too white after the storm's blackness. Ayla followed, steadying the IV line. Keaton Voss lay pale and unmoving under the thin blanket, the monitors keeping rhythm for a heart that seemed reluctant to beat. A woman in a pressed blazer waited at the end of the hall, dry and unhurried despite the weather. Her badge read, Marjorie Penn, Hospital Administrator. She smiled without warmth, Straight to imaging, she said crisply. Dr. Klein's expecting him. Room's ready? Ayla frowned. That was fast. Emergency patients didn't go straight to imaging. They went through triage. We need full trauma evaluation first, she said. Penn's smile didn't falter. Sheriff Hart's already arranged it. Theo and Ayla exchanged a glance. There it was again. The sheriff's already arranged it. They followed her down a side corridor that didn't lead to the main trauma bay. Penn keyed open a private elevator with a badge swipe. The doors closed behind them with a whisper that felt final. The elevator rose, humming softly. Penn stood straight, tablet in hand. She didn't look at them. You two did a fine job stabilizing him, she said. This man's family is influential. Your quick action may have saved his life. Ayla's jaw tightened. And the mother and infant we found in the ravine? Penn's eyes flicked toward her. Another unit handled them. You've done your part. Theo shifted his weight. They were hit by this man's vehicle. Unconfirmed, Penn said smoothly. You focus on the patient you were assigned. That's how we keep order. The elevator doors opened before Ayla could reply. A small surgical prep area waited beyond, gleaming steel and the hum of machines. Two nurses moved briskly inside, preparing equipment. Theo set the stretcher lock. Vital stable, he said flatly. BP 110/78. O2 96%. Excellent, Penn said, tapping notes. We'll take it from here. Ayla hesitated. Every instinct screamed something was wrong. We're supposed to stay with the patient until transfer of care sign-off, she said, citing the regulation like a shield. Penn's tone cooled. Consider this your sign-off. Thank you for your service. For a long second, no one moved. Theo's jaw worked as though he were grinding words he couldn't say. Ayla finally unhooked her gloves and tossed them in the bin, her motions sharp. Fine, but we'll need documentation of transfer. You'll receive it electronically, Penn said. Ayla smiled tightly. I bet we will. They walked back down the corridor in silence, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above. Rook waited just outside the sliding doors, fur still damp but eyes bright, as if he'd been pacing the hallway since they vanished. He trotted to Ayla, tail low, pressing against her leg. She knelt, running her fingers through his thick fur. Beneath the smell of wet dog, she caught a faint trace of disinfectant. Someone had tried to towel him off. Theo exhaled through his nose. They got him upstairs before anyone asked for ID or intake. You ever seen a hospital move like that? Not for regular folks, Ayla said. Guess he's not regular. They walked toward the main ER desk. A nurse named Hollis Kane, someone Theo had trained with years ago, spotted them and came over. Heard you brought in the sheriff's golden boy, she said under her breath. You two okay? Golden boy? Ayla asked. Hollis lowered her voice. Keaton Voss, Judge Voss's son. You didn't know? Theo's mouth twitched. Now we do. Hollis leaned closer, eyes darting toward Penn's office window. Word from upstairs is they're already drafting an incident statement. Says the woman in I, the other car lost control. You might want to double-check your reports before you sign off. Ayla felt her pulse skip. They're blaming her? Yeah, Hollis said. And if I were you, I'd keep copies of everything. Hart's been in and out of here all night. Theo rubbed his forehead. You still got friends in dispatch? Maybe. Then maybe make sure the timestamps don't start after the crash. Hollis hesitated. Theo, you didn't hear it from me. He nodded. Of course not. Ayla straightened. Thanks, Hollis. The nurse squeezed her arm once, then hurried off, leaving the faint scent of antiseptic and worry in her wake. They stepped outside into the ambulance bay again. The rain had eased to a mist, thin and cold. The parking lot glowed under sodium lights. For the first time that night, Ayla could hear herself think, and what she heard wasn't comforting. "They're burying her," she said quietly. "Juniper. They'll write her off as reckless before sunrise." Theo stared out at the empty road. "And the sheriff gets to look like he saved a judge's kid." Ayla's jaw tightened. "Not if there's proof." He turned toward her. "Proof?" She crouched beside Rook, lifting his collar. The mount still hung loose and empty. "SAR dogs wear cameras for debris searches," she said. "That's how handlers track them in bad weather." Theo frowned. Maybe it came off in the crash. Maybe. She stood, wiping rain from her face. Or maybe someone didn't want it found. Inside the rig, Ayla sat on the bench seat and flipped through her notes. Her handwriting had run in places, ink blurred by rain. She could still make out the timeline. 22:54. Car located. 23:01. Infant resuscitated. 23:07. Second unit arrived. Clean. Consistent. But something about the sheriff's early arrival gnawed at her. He'd shown up before that second rig, before her second call even hit dispatch. She picked up the radio. "Unit 12, copy status on sheriff's ETA for 23's hour mark." Static. Then, "Dispatch confirms Sheriff Hart reported en route at 22:47. Theo raised a brow. "Before we called it in." She met his eyes. "Exactly." Rook lifted his head, ears pricked, as if the word exactly meant something to him too. Theo rubbed a hand over his mouth. "So he knew there was a wreck before we found it." "Or before it was supposed to happen," Ayla murmured. He blinked at her. "That's a hell of a thing to say. So's driving drunk into a woman's car and calling it an accident." She looked back toward the hospital's upper windows. The blinds were drawn, but faint movement flickered behind them, shadows passing like silent guards. Theo's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number glowed on the screen. "Leave it alone." He turned the screen toward her. "Guess they know our number." Ayla stared at the text, then at Rook, who had set his head on her knee as if anchoring her to something solid. "You ever get the feeling the storm's still going?" she said softly. "Even after it stops raining?" Theo gave a tired half-smile. "All the time." They sat in the dim ambulance light, listening to the distant rumble of thunder rolling farther away. The night had gone quiet on the surface, but underneath, Ayla could feel the next wave coming. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, certain. "Tomorrow," she said, "we find that camera." Rook's tail thumped once on the floor. The next morning broke gray and cold, the kind of light that looked tired before it even started. Ayla sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance, staring at her reflection in the dark windshield. Her uniform was clean, hair pulled back tight, but her eyes looked hollow. She'd been awake since before dawn, replaying the same images. Rook in the road, the submerged car, the baby's tiny gasp, and Sheriff Hart's face when he'd told them to keep moving. Theo climbed in, 2 coffees in hand. "No updates on Juniper or the baby," he said, passing her one. "Checked the overnight chart. Their names aren't listed anywhere." "Not listed?" Ayla frowned. "How's that possible?" "Paperwork says private patient transfer." He sipped his coffee. "Means someone made them disappear." She looked down at the cup, steam curling against the chill. "Then we find them the same way we find anything. Start with the details everyone else ignores." Rook was waiting outside the bay doors, tail low but eyes alive, as if he'd been guarding the place all night. When Ayla stepped out, he rose immediately, head lifting toward her like he understood what came next. "Good boy," she murmured, clipping a spare leash to his collar. You ready to show us what you were trying to tell us last night? Theo frowned. You really think he remembers? She looked at the dog, who was already tugging towards the storm drain near Bay 3. I think he hasn't stopped remembering. The metal grate still glistened with moisture. Isla knelt, peering into the slats. The drain was deep, filled with runoff and gravel, a small whirlpool of silt circling the center. Rook barked once, pacing, tail stiff. Isla slipped on gloves and reached down, fingers skimming cold water and debris. Nothing. Theo crouched beside her. Even if the camera's down there, it's probably shot. Maybe, she said, still searching, but maybe it's not. Then Rook nosed her elbow, whining, and pawed at a section near the curb. Isla followed his lead. And there it was. A glint of black plastic wedged between rust and leaves. She worked her fingers in and pulled it free, dripping and grimy, but intact. Got you, she whispered. Theo let out a low whistle. Rook, you're officially my favorite partner. The dog barked once, proud. Ayla wiped the small camera with a towel and held it up. SAR issue. Harness cam. Same mount size as his collar. Theo eyed it. Think it still works? Only one way to find out. They drove to Theo's apartment, a cluttered second-floor walk-up above a feed store that always smelled faintly of hay. Rook trotted up the stairs as if he'd lived there all his life. Ayla plugged the camera into Theo's old laptop, praying the thing had enough power left to run. The screen flickered, then came to life, file directory intact. Ayla scrolled until she found one labeled Auto Record 10-1475. She double-clicked. The footage began with rain, heavy, blinding, the rhythm of tires on wet asphalt. The camera bounced with movement, attached to Rook's chest. The angle shifted to headlights in the dark. A small sedan, taillights glowing red ahead. Then, in the rear view of the sedan, another vehicle. Closer. Too close. Truck, Theo muttered. Big one. They watched as the truck surged forward, bright beams flaring against the wet glass. The sedan swerved slightly, then straightened. The truck moved in again, inches behind. Then impact. Metal screamed, lights blurred, and the world tumbled sideways. The sedan spun out of view. The camera jolted. Rook must have been thrown from the open passenger window. Ayla's stomach clenched. It's proof, Theo leaned in. Keep watching. The image steadied. Rain and mud filled the frame. Minutes passed. Then headlights cut through the darkness again. Another vehicle pulling up. A sheriff's cruiser. The timestamp read 2241. Before dispatch ever got the call, Ayla said softly. Hart climbed out, radio in hand, striding straight to the truck, the same one that had caused the crash. He opened the driver's side door. The figure slumped inside looked like Keaton Voss. Theo's mouth hardened. He was never in that car when it rolled. Hart staged it. The camera's final seconds showed Hart looking around, scanning the road. His flashlight beam swept past Rook's direction. Then the feed went black. They sat in silence. Only the laptop fan hummed. Ayla finally spoke. We need to make copies of this before anyone finds out we have it. Theo nodded. And we hand it to someone who isn't in Hart's pocket. State troopers, Ayla said. Reel's clean. I trained with him 2 summers ago. Theo stood, stretching his stiff shoulders. Let's get moving before the sheriff realizes we're not as dumb as he thinks. Rook barked softly, as if agreeing. They hit the road just after noon. The clouds had thinned, leaving a silver-gray sky and puddles like mirrors. The radio crackled faintly with routine chatter. Everything looked calm, but Ayla's nerves hummed. She'd seen what power did to people who thought they'd never be caught. Hart wouldn't go quietly. At a red light, Theo glanced at her. You realize once this gets out, we're both off the payroll. Ayla gave a small, tight smile. Better broke than complicit. He grinned faintly. Guess there's worse company to be unemployed with. She laughed under her breath. The tension cracked just enough for her to breathe again. They turned onto the highway leading toward the state trooper substation. 3 hours east. The road curved along the edge of the same river where they'd found Juniper. The water ran high and brown, still restless from the storm. Rook, lying across the back seat, lifted his head and growled. Ayla looked up. In the side mirror, a dark SUV trailed them. No lights, but too close. It had been behind them since the last junction. Theo's grip tightened on the wheel. We've got a tail. How far? 50 yards, maybe less. Ayla leaned forward. Take the next turn, the old quarry road. Theo nodded. He killed the headlights, veered right, and the ambulance shuddered over gravel. The SUV followed, engine low and deliberate. Not random, he said quietly. That's Hart. Ayla's pulse pounded. He knows. They tore down the narrow dirt road, trees whipping past in streaks of green and brown. The SUV closed in, its grille a dark snarl in the mirror. Theo slammed the brakes. Hang on! The ambulance skidded sideways, fishtailing into the mud. The SUV swerved to avoid collision, spinning out in a spray of gravel. Ayla yanked open the passenger door, clutching the camera in one hand. Move! She shouted. Rook jumped down first, barking furiously. Theo grabbed the laptop and followed her into the trees. Behind them, the SUV door opened. A single figure stepped out, silhouetted against the pale sky. Sheriff Hart. Gun drawn. They ducked behind a fallen log, hearts hammering. Mud soaked through Ayla's knees. Her lungs burned from the cold air. Theo crouched beside her, whispering, We can't outrun him on foot. I'm not trying to outrun him, Ayla said. She reached into her pocket, fingers shaking only slightly. She pulled out her phone and tapped the upload button on the screen. I just need signal. Theo peered upward through the branches. Got 2 bars. Ayla hit send. Rook barked once, sharp, warning. Hart's voice echoed across the clearing. You've made a mistake, Rowan. Hand over what's mine and I'll pretend this didn't happen. She looked at Theo, who gave a tight nod. She shouted back, You mean what's evidence? A shot cracked, splintering bark inches above her head. Guess that's a no, Theo muttered. The upload bar on her screen crept to 70%. She held her breath. Another shot. Dirt sprayed her shoulder. Rook growled, muscles coiled. Then, beep. Upload complete. Ayla exhaled, a fierce, quiet sound that wasn't fear, but victory. She turned toward Theo. Run! They bolted through the trees, Rook bounding ahead, the sound of Hart's curses fading behind them. By the time they reached the main road, the sky had opened again, sunlight spilling like mercy through the thinning clouds. Theo's truck idled at the feed store lot where they'd left it earlier. They jumped in, drenched, breathless. You got it sent? He asked. Ayla nodded, heart still pounding. Straight to Trooper Rill's secure line. Theo gave a low whistle. Well, Hart's storm just got a whole lot worse. Rook curled in the back seat, panting softly, eyes half-lidded. For the first time since the night before, he looked at peace. Ayla reached back to scratch behind his ear. Good boy, she whispered. You did it. Outside, the wind carried the last scent of rain away. But Ayla knew the calm wouldn't last. Somewhere behind them, Sheriff Hart was already regrouping, and this time, he'd be desperate. Still, as the truck rolled east toward the open plains, Ayla felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. By the time they reached town again, the sun had sunk low, turning the streets a washed-out gold. The calm felt false. Ayla could feel it in her stomach, the kind of stillness that comes before something breaks. Theo parked near the emergency bay of Summit General. "We shouldn't be here," he said quietly, eyes scanning the lot. "You know Hart's got half the staff on his leash." Ayla zipped her jacket. "Then we'll talk to the ones who aren't." Rook jumped out first, landing light and ready, tail sweeping once before his ears went alert. Ayla followed him toward the sliding doors. Every step through that glass made her pulse rise. Inside, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee gone cold. Staff moved with that fast, tired efficiency unique to hospitals. But some glanced at her too long, as if they'd already heard. Theo spoke low. "Stick to calm questions. If they think we're digging, they'll call him." "Calm," she said. "Sure." At the nurse's station, Hollis Kane looked up, relief and worry tangled in her face. "You two shouldn't be here," she hissed. "Penn's been asking where you went after shift." Ayla leaned in. "Then she knows we found something." Hollis looked toward Penn's glass-walled office. "They're rewriting everything. Intake times, triage reports, half the digital files for that night are gone." Theo frowned. "Gone as in erased?" "Gone as in never existed." Hollis glanced around, then slid a small flash drive across the counter. "Backup logs. I copied what I could before they wiped the server." Ayla pocketed it. "You're taking a risk." "I know," Hollis said, "but I'm not letting them bury a mother and child to protect a drunk." Theo lowered his voice. "Where's Juniper now?" Hollis hesitated. "She was transferred to a private wing, but no one's seen the paperwork. It's like she vanished. If you want my guess, Penn's hiding her until this blows over." Ayla's eyes hardened. "Then we blow it over ourselves." They turned toward the administrative corridor. Penn's office door stood ajar, soft light spilling from inside. Rook padded beside Ayla, silent but focused. Inside, Penn's voice carried in low, irritated tones. "Yes, Judge Voss. Everything's being handled. The report will read that she lost control in the rain. No need to involve state troopers. The sheriff has it contained." Theo's jaw tightened. Ayla motioned for silence. Penn turned her back to them, phone pressed to her ear, heels clicking as she paced. "The footage," she said. "Destroyed. I promise you, nothing ties Keaton to the collision. By tomorrow, this will look like an unfortunate accident." Ayla stepped into the doorway. "That's funny," she said, her voice steady. "Because I've got that footage saved in 3 places." Penn froze mid-step. The blood drained from her face. "You don't know what you're doing," she said softly. "This isn't about you." Theo took a step forward. "It is when people die and you cover it up." Penn's calm slipped. "You have no idea who you're up against." "Then maybe they should find out who they're up against," Ayla said, "because we're done keeping quiet." Penn's eyes darted toward her desk phone. Ayla caught the movement and shook her head. "Call the sheriff, and I make that video public." Penn's lips parted. Shock first, then anger. "You think you're heroes? You'll end up unemployed and discredited before morning." Theo smiled without humor. "At least we'll sleep fine?" Penn's hand trembled as she shut her phone off. "You're making a terrible mistake." Ayla turned to leave. "So did you." Back in the hallway, Rook's nails clicked on the linoleum. Theo's adrenaline was fading, replaced by a heavy quiet. "She's going to warn Hart," he said. "I'm counting on it," Ayla replied. "The faster he runs, the more noise he makes. We need that noise." "Still," he said, voice low, "we should find Juniper before she disappears for good." Ayla's gaze shifted to the private wing sign. "Then that's where we start." They took the elevator up. The doors opened on a silent corridor, floors gleaming, lights dimmed to night mode. At the far end, a single security guard stood by a closed room. Isla approached, flashing her EMT badge. "Transfer check for patient Juniper Hale." The guard frowned. "No patients by that name here." Theo crossed his arms. "Then who's in that room?" "Confidential." Ayla leaned in. "You can tell me, or I can call state troopers with a warrant." The guard hesitated, then sighed. "She's in there, but I wasn't supposed to say. Orders from Sheriff Hart himself." Ayla's pulse jumped. "Thank you." Inside, the room smelled faintly of saline and flowers. Juniper lay asleep, her baby in a bassinet beside her, both breathing steady, color back in their cheeks. Relief washed through Ayla so hard it nearly buckled her knees. Theo smiled quietly. "You did it." Juniper's eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked confused, then recognition dawned. "You came back." "We had to make sure you were safe," Ayla said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Better. They said I couldn't see anyone. Why?" Ayla exchanged a look with Theo. "Because they don't want you talking." Juniper's eyes filled with fear. "Is it him? The man who hit us?" "It's worse," Ayla said. "He's the judge's son, and the sheriff's covering for him." Juniper's hand tightened around the blanket. "Then you can't let them win." Theo nodded. "We won't." Rook nudged Ayla's leg, eyes fixed on the hallway. His growl was low, rumbling deep in his chest. Ayla's heart dropped. "Theo," she whispered, "he's here." Footsteps echoed outside. Heavy. Familiar. Sheriff Hart's voice carried through the door. "You really couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Theo's hand went to the doorknob. "Time to end this." Hart stepped into the doorway, rainwater still dripping from his coat, revolver at his hip. He looked older than he had the night before, anger etched deep around his eyes. "You've caused me a lot of trouble," he said evenly. "Now hand over whatever you think you've got before someone else gets hurt." Ayla stood her ground. "You can't hide it anymore, Sheriff. The footage has already gone public." Hart blinked. For the first time, real fear flickered. "You're bluffing." Theo shook his head. "Check the morning feed. Troopers already have it." Hart's jaw worked. "You don't know what you've done." "Yeah," Ayla said. "We stopped pretending." He drew the gun. Rook barked, loud and sharp, and the baby stirred in the bassinet. Ayla's breath caught, muscles ready. Theo shifted slightly, enough to block Juniper and the child. Hart's voice was steady but shaking underneath. "You think the truth saves anyone? You'll be next." Ayla stared straight at him, then pulled the trigger. Seconds stretched. The world went still. Then, the sound of boots in the hall. "Sheriff Hart," a voice barked. "Drop your weapon." Trooper Rill appeared with 2 officers behind him, guns drawn. Hart froze, eyes flicking between them and Ayla. "You've got no idea how far this goes," he said quietly. Rill's tone was calm, final. "Then you can explain it downtown." Hart's weapon hit the floor with a metallic clang. Rook's growl faded. Ayla finally let herself breathe. Outside, dawn spilled pink over the mountains. Juniper sat up in bed, her baby asleep on her chest. Ayla stood beside her, the weight of the night finally lifting. "Thank you," Juniper whispered. "You saved us." Ayla smiled faintly. "You saved yourself. We just listened when no one else would." Theo leaned against the wall, exhausted but smiling. "You think they'll actually charge him?" "Yeah," Ayla said. "Hart's going down. Keaton too. The footage is everywhere." She looked down at Rook, who was sitting proud beside the bed, tail tapping the floor. And this guy's getting a medal? Theo laughed softly. Pretty sure he's just hoping for bacon. For the first time in a long time, Ayla laughed too. Quiet, relieved, real. Outside, the storm clouds finally broke apart, sunlight pouring through. The truth was out. The danger passed. But for Ayla Rowan, it wasn't just another case. It was the night she found her courage again, and a dog named Rook had led her straight to it. The next morning came soft and quiet, as if the world itself needed to rest. Mist curled over the ridges, carrying the last memory of rain. Ayla stood outside the hospital with a cup of black coffee, watching Rook chase puddles in the parking lot. For once, she let herself breathe. Theo joined her, his uniform jacket slung over one shoulder. "Trooper Rill called," he said. "Hart's been booked. Keaton Voss is in custody under guard. Penn resigned before sunrise." Ayla nodded slowly. "It's really over." "Yeah," he said, "and Juniper and the baby are being transferred, to a real hospital this time." She smiled faintly, her eyes following the dog. "He knew," she said. "He wouldn't move from that road until someone listened." Theo looked at her. "Guess he's not the only one who refused to look away." Ayla laughed quietly. "Maybe not." They stood side by side as the clouds parted, sunlight breaking through in long, forgiving streaks. The storm was finally over, but something new was beginning. Truth, peace, and the kind of hope only survivors understood. 2 days later, the world seemed lighter. The mountains steamed under sunlight, and Summit General buzzed with cautious calm. Ayla walked the corridor one last time, clipboard under her arm, Rook padding faithfully beside her. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, but there was peace in it now. Earned, not given. Juniper sat by the window in her recovery room, the baby asleep against her chest. She looked up when Ayla entered, smiling through tired eyes. "They told me you're heading back to search and rescue." Ayla nodded. "Feels like it's time. Can't ignore what I was meant to do." "You didn't ignore it," Juniper said softly. "You listened when no one else did." Theo appeared at the door, holding takeout coffee for them both. "I hear Rook's getting his own commendation," he teased. "Might go to his head." Ayla grinned. He earned it. Outside, the sky turned gold as sunlight filtered through the last thin veil of clouds. Rook lay at Ayla's feet, content at last. She looked at Theo, then at Juniper and her child, and felt the quiet weight of survival turn into something steadier. Gratitude. For the first time in years, Ayla wasn't haunted by what she'd lost. She was defined by what she'd saved. The headlines came, fast over the next week. Sheriff arrested in evidence tampering scandal. Judge's son indicted for hit and run. It was strange seeing names she knew printed in black and white, the same ones that had once carried untouchable authority. Ayla read every article, but what she felt wasn't triumph. It was relief. Justice didn't erase what had happened, but it mattered that truth finally had a voice. Theo met her outside the station, coffee in hand as usual. "You see this?" he said, handing her a folded paper. "Trooper Rill's statement. They're crediting the rescue to an off-duty EMT guided by an unidentified German shepherd." Ayla smiled. "Unidentified, huh? Guess he prefers to stay humble." Rook wagged his tail, sitting square between them like a sentry who understood English perfectly. Theo chuckled, scratching behind his ears. "He's got better instincts than most men I've worked with." They started walking down the quiet street. The storm-damaged trees had been cleared, but the smell of pine and wet soil still hung in the air. "What's next for you?" Theo asked. "I reapply to search and rescue next week," Ayla said. "I thought leaving it behind made me strong. Turns out it just made me scared." Theo nodded. And now? Now I'm done being afraid. He studied her for a moment, something warm in his eyes. Dinner still on the table? She smiled. Only if Rook comes. The dog barked once, as if agreeing. They walked on beneath a clean sky, the mountains sharp and bright again. The world didn't feel small anymore. It felt honest. And for the first time since the night of the storm, Ayla knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. A week later, Ayla stood on the ridge overlooking the same highway where everything began. The storm's slick asphalt was dry now, sunlight flashing off it like new metal. Rook trotted at her side, tail waving as he sniffed at the grass. She let her hand fall to his head, fingers brushing the scar at his ear. Guess this road looks different in daylight, she murmured. Theo's truck pulled up beside her. He stepped out with 2 mugs of coffee, offering one with a crooked grin. Heard they're naming you in the commendation report, he said. And the dog's getting a medal. That's gotta sting some egos. Ayla laughed softly. I'll frame it for him. He earned it more than I did. Theo leaned on the hood beside her, quiet for a long moment. You ever think about how close we were to missing all of it? Every day, she said. One more second of doubt, and that baby wouldn't be alive. They stood together, watching the empty curve where Rook had once stood in the rain. The mountains whispered in the wind. Theo finally asked, So what's next? Ayla smiled. Search and rescue called. I start next week. He nodded, a small, proud smile. Good. You're right where you belong. Rook barked once, tail wagging as if seconding the thought. Ayla turned toward the horizon, the morning wide and bright before her. Whatever storms came next, she was ready. The morning of the commendation ceremony was clear and bright, the kind of perfect day that felt borrowed from another life. The courthouse lawn gleamed under the sun, flags snapping softly in the breeze. Rows of folding chairs filled with townsfolk, reporters, and first responders stretched across the grass. A brass band played a hopeful tune that carried through the crisp air. Ayla stood just behind the stage, smoothing the crease of her uniform pants. Rook sat faithfully beside her, his red harness gleaming with a new silver tag. Theo joined her, handing over a coffee. You nervous? He asked. Maybe a little, she admitted, but this time it's the good kind. He smiled. Then let's get through it together. You and the dog can handle the cameras. I'll try not to trip. Rook barked once, tail wagging as if agreeing. The mayor's voice rose through the microphone, recounting the events of the storm, the ambulance, the blocked road, the dog who refused to move. When Ayla's name echoed across the speakers, she stepped forward into the sunlight. The crowd applauded, warm and genuine. She accepted her plaque, feeling pride instead of guilt for the first time in years. Then Rook received his medal. Cameras flashed. The dog tilted his head proudly, earning laughter and cheers. Afterward, Juniper approached with her baby nestled close. He's breathing easy now, she said. We're both alive because you stopped that night. Ayla smiled, voice soft. Because he stopped us. She nodded at Rook. Theo stepped beside her, glancing between them. You think the storm ever really ends? Ayla looked at the sky, where thin clouds drifted like memory. Maybe not, she said. But I think we learn how to walk in the sun again. Juniper smiled through tears. Then keep walking. You've earned it. As the band struck up again, Ayla, Theo, and Rook stepped down from the stage together. The road stretched beyond the courthouse, washed clean and golden in the afternoon light. Rook trotted ahead, medal catching the sun. Theo slipped his hand into hers, and for once, Ayla didn't pull away. The storm was behind them, but its lesson stayed. Courage isn't about running into danger. It's about refusing to look away when the truth calls your name. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.